Hey everyone, have you ever had your family disapprove of someone you love? That feeling of your own blood turning their back on you because they think they know what's best? It's one of the deepest cuts there is. But what happens when the person they look down on turns out to be a literal hero? This is a story about love, loyalty, and a wedding day surprise that will have your jaw on the floor. It's a powerful lesson in why you should never judge a book by its cover. If you believe that true love is worth fighting for, no matter what anyone says, then you are in for a treat. So get ready for an emotional roller coaster. And hey, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you will not believe how this unfolds. Let us know in the comments about a time you stood up for someone you love. Now, let's get into the story. The silence in Grace's childhood home was louder than any argument could ever be. It was a heavy, disapproving quiet that had settled over the rooms ever since she'd said his name, Leo. Her mother, Eleanor, meticulously polished an already gleaming silver picture frame, her back to Grace. Her father, Richard, stared out the bay window at his perfectly manicured lawn, his shoulders set in a rigid line of disappointment. "You're throwing your life away, Grace," her mother finally said, her voice crisp and cold. "A mechanic. You have a master's degree. You were raised for so much more. He's not just a mechanic, Mom. He owns his own garage. He's kind. He's hardworking. He loves me." "Love?" Her father turned, his face a mask of frustrated concern. "Love doesn't put a roof over your head in the right neighborhood. Love doesn't get you into the country club. For God's sake, Grace, the man has tattoos." Grace felt the familiar heat of defensive anger rise in her chest. "His tattoos are from his time in the army, Dad. He served our country. And now he fixes mufflers," Eleanor said, placing the frame down with a sharp click. "It's not about snobbery, darling. It's about stability. It's about being with someone from your own world. This Leo, he's a nice man, I'm sure. But he's a nobody. He'll always be a nobody. And if you marry him, you'll be a nobody too." The word hung in the air, poisonous, and final. Nobody. They had never even met him. They'd seen a photo of him in his grease-stained coveralls, standing in front of his shop, Leo's Auto Repair. And their judgment had been instant and absolute. Michael stormed into the kitchen, his face pale. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? My colleagues. They're asking me why we weren't there. They're calling us fools, snobs." The doorbell rang. It was a delivery service with a large, flat package. With numb fingers, Eleanor opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful silver-framed clock. The card, written on official White House stationery, said, "To Mr. and Mrs. Leo Grant. May your time together be long, happy, and filled with the love you so clearly share. With warmest wishes, Jonathan Hayes." It was the presidential gift. A copy had been sent to her parents' address, a courtesy from the White House, a permanent, gleaming monument to their catastrophic misjudgment. Eleanor sank into a chair, the clock ticking loudly in the profound silence. The nobody was a national hero. The wedding they had skipped was a historic event. The daughter they had dismissed was the wife of a man the president called a friend. They had chosen status over their own child, and in doing so, they had lost their place in the one story that truly mattered. The ticking of the clock seemed to mock them, a constant reminder of the precious time they had already wasted, and the bridge they had burned for the sake of a reputation that was now in ashes. Her brother Michael, a carbon copy of their father in a Brooks Brothers suit, had been the most vocal. "You're embarrassing the family, Grace. What will people say? My little sister marrying a grease monkey? It's pathetic." The wedding invitations had been sent, gold embossed, heavy cardstock, to every socialite, business associate, and distant cousin in their parents' orbit. And one by one, the RSVPs had trickled in. Regrets. All regrets. The final blow came a week before the date. A single formal email from her father. "Grace, your mother and I cannot, in good conscience, endorse this union. We will not be attending. We have advised the rest of the family to do the same. We hope you come to your senses before you make a terrible mistake. Dad." She had read it standing in the tiny kitchen of the apartment she shared with Leo, tears blurring the words on the screen. He had come home later, smelling of engine oil and honesty, and found her curled on the couch. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just held her, his strong, capable arms a sanctuary from the world's cruelty. "We don't need them, Gracie," he'd murmured into her hair. "We have us. That's all that's ever mattered." So, they planned a new wedding. Their wedding. It would be at the small, charming community church in Leo's neighborhood, followed by a reception in the back garden of his favorite local pub, the Oak and Axe. The guest list was short. A handful of Leo's army buddies and their wives, his employees from the garage, and a few of Grace's true friends who saw Leo for the gentle, loyal man he was. The morning of the wedding, Grace got ready in their apartment, helped by her best friend, Chloe. There was no expensive designer dress, just a simple, elegant ivory sheath she'd found online. No professional makeup artist, just Chloe doing her makeup while they laughed and drank cheap champagne. It was perfect, but as she slipped into her dress, a deep, aching sadness threatened to overwhelm her. Her family, her own flesh and blood, they weren't coming. They had chosen their reputation over her happiness. "Hey," Chloe said, seeing her face in the mirror. "Look at me. You are marrying an amazing man who adores you. That's the win. Everything else is just noise." Grace nodded, blinking back tears. She was making the right choice. She knew it in her soul. But walking down the aisle without her father's arm, seeing the empty pews where her family should have been, it was a pain she hadn't fully prepared for. As the vintage car Leo had restored himself pulled up to the church, Grace took a deep, shaky breath. She was about to marry her nobody, and she had never been more sure of anything in her life. The small community church was filled with a warm, genuine light that streamed through the simple stained glass windows. Every wooden pew was occupied, not by society pages, but by people who genuinely loved them. Leo's army buddies, big men with soft hearts, sat shoulder to shoulder with mechanics in their best suits. The air buzzed with happy, unpretentious chatter. Grace stood at the back of the church, her arm linked through that of Joe, Leo's oldest friend and former staff sergeant. He was giving her away. As the first notes of the processional began, she looked down the aisle. And there he was. Leo, standing at the altar, clean-shaven and looking incredibly handsome in a simple, well-fitted navy suit. His eyes, the color of a summer sky, found hers, and the love and awe in them took her breath away. All the noise, all the pain from her family's rejection, faded into a distant hum. This was right. She walked toward him, beaming, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Just as she reached the altar and took Leo's outstretched hands, a strange sound began to grow outside the church, a low rumble, followed by the distinct crunch of gravel under heavy tires. A few guests near the windows peeked out, their eyes widening. Whispers rippled through the congregation. The church doors, which had been closed, were suddenly bathed in the flashing red and blue lights of police vehicles. The officiant, a kindly local pastor, paused, looking confused. "What's going on?" Grace whispered to Leo, her perfect moment suddenly feeling invaded. Leo's face, however, held a strange, knowing calm. He gave her hands a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, Gracie. Just wait." The massive, ornate church doors swung open. Instead of police, two men in impeccably tailored dark suits and discreet earpieces entered, their posture ramrod straight, their eyes scanning the room with professional efficiency. Secret Service. The entire church fell into a stunned, breathless silence. You could have heard a pin drop. The agents parted, and standing in the doorway was a man every single person in the room recognized instantly. President Jonathan Hayes. He was dressed not in formal attire, but in a respectful dark blue suit, a warm, slightly apologetic smile on his face. Grace's mind went completely blank. The President of the United States. Here, at her small, familyless wedding. President Hayes walked down the center aisle as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He stopped before a completely stunned Grace and a calm, smiling Leo. "Leo," the president said, his voice familiar and warm as if greeting an old friend. "I heard through the grapevine you were finally letting the best one get away. I couldn't miss it." He then turned to Grace, taking her trembling hand in both of his. "You must be Grace. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I promise." His eyes were kind, twinkling with genuine warmth. Leo never was much of a talker, but when he speaks, it's worth listening to. "He told me you were the one. I can see why." Grace was speechless. She could only manage a wobbly, tear-filled smile. The president gestured to one of his aides, who stepped forward and handed Leo a small, beautifully wrapped box. "A small token for the new couple," President Hayes said. "It's a clock, a tradition in my family, to remind you that the time you have with the ones you love is the most precious thing in the world." Leo, his voice thick with emotion, simply said, "Thank you, sir. It means everything." The president then turned to the stunned pastor. "Please don't let me interrupt. Proceed." And with that, President Jonathan Hayes took a seat in the front pew, next to a burly, tearful mechanic named Dave, as if he belonged there all along. The ceremony continued, though no one would really remember the words. The air was electric with a surreal, beautiful magic. As Leo and Grace exchanged their vows, the flashing lights of the press corps, who had followed the presidential motorcade, lit up the church windows like a disco ball of destiny. In that moment, the empty pews where Grace's family should have been were no longer a source of pain. They were a testament to their blindness. They had called Leo a nobody, and the President of the United States had just flown across the country to watch that nobody get married. The reception at the Oaken Axe was less a party and more a state of joyous, disbelieving chaos. President Hayes stayed for a full hour, shaking hands with every stunned guest, posing for pictures with the bridal party, and even sharing a beer with Leo's army buddies, listening intently to their stories. He was, to everyone's amazement, just a guy, a profoundly important one, who seemed genuinely happy to be there, celebrating his friend. Before he left, surrounded by his security detail, he pulled Grace and Leo aside. "What I said in there was true, Grace," he said, his tone serious for a moment. "This man, he's one of the bravest, most selfless people I've ever met. What he did, he never told you, did he?" Grace looked at Leo, who shook his head, a faint blush on his cheeks. "On a tour overseas, our convoy was hit. My vehicle was disabled. Leo here, he didn't hesitate. He ran through active fire, pulled 2 of my men to safety, and then got me out. He took a piece of shrapnel in his leg doing it. He saved my life, and the lives of my team. He's a hero. A real, honest-to-God hero. And from everything he's told me, he's finally found his own." He smiled at Grace. "Take care of each other." With a final handshake, he was gone, the motorcade pulling away with a roar, leaving behind a pub full of people who would tell this story for the rest of their lives. The next morning, Grace and Leo slept in, exhausted and happy in their small apartment. The phone started ringing at 8 a.m. It was Chloe, screaming, "Turn on the news, Grace, turn on the news." Bleary-eyed, they flicked on the television. There, on the screen of a major national news network, was a photo of them kissing at the altar, with President Hayes smiling in the background. The banner headline read, "President's Surprise Wedding Crasher, Honors Unknown Hero." The story was everywhere. The mechanic who saved a president. The wedding abandoned by family, attended by a nation. Their love story, Leo's heroism, her family's rejection. It was all national news. Back in her parents' silent, perfect house, the facade was crumbling. Eleanor stared at the newspaper on the breakfast table, her hand trembling so badly, the china cup rattled in its saucer. The front-page photo showed her daughter, radiant, being kissed by the nobody mechanic, while the President of the United States looked on with paternal pride. Richard couldn't speak. He just stared, the words "unknown hero" burning into his retinas.